importing industry. One of them was born into it, and the other one kind of clawed her way into it. And it was a novel that, the seeds of it kind of came about 25 years ago when I wanted to learn enough about food and wine that I could write about it, because I was like, I'm going to do this now. And I sat down, I was like, I don't know anything. And so I got a job at the best restaurant I could and hoped that it would teach me. And that was where I encountered this whole idea that, the wine that is in your glass that we think of as being just a luxury, really refined kind of product, comes from farmers and comes from far away, and somebody had to fall in love with it in much the same way you have to fall in love with a novel or a memoir or something, and believe that this is a thing that you can distinguish from all the other things and share. So I sort of carried that with me for a really long time, and finally decided it might be fun to write a little bit about the wine world. And it turns out as soon as you ask a question of a wine person, it is fascinating. And so it's just a really amazing world that I had a great time writing about.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy Wilson, and that's my first book behind me called When Did I Get Like This? It came out in 2010, a parenting memoir. And so now I am putting the finishing touches on my next memoir and essays. It's called Happy to Help. It's coming out later this year. And it's about being a woman who is happy to help, which I think is the assignment of literally every woman. All of us have too much to do, and when we try to do less or cut back or hand things over or do things differently, it's never as easy as that. So that's what the book is about.
Now, all of you write about friendship, family. All of these relationships are really at the center of the stories. Your relationship to others, the relationships between each other. What is the secret of writing really great relationships?
Living them. I always, for every book I've written, I have like a moment of terror when the people closest to me in my life are about to read it. I never write characters that are meant to be people in my life, but there are always recognizable elements, right? Because you live, and at least for me, when I write, like a lot of subconscious channeling happens at first, and a lot of, I think, the people that you love the most sort of leak through on the page.
Yeah, I think just complexity and individuality, because we all know a lot more about each other and understand our relationships in a great deal more nuance than we often stop to think, because we are just like, oh, well, I know this and I'm reacting because I know all of this. And so when you try to write about that, that's your opportunity to think really hard about what was going on in that last weird interaction you had with somebody, or those moments where you're like, I can't quite put my finger on what was wrong there, but how did I know that something was not right? And so I find that the most helpful thing is to pay attention to all the stuff that we actually are very aware of in our lives, and then try and give the same level of observation and understanding to the people that I am inventing.
When you write memoir, you're writing about real people, real relationships, right? And that's always tricky. And I use my friend Wendy Aarons, who's a humorist. She said this at one point, and I've never forgotten it, that the best comedy she thought is the I'm the asshole comedy, in which, like, if you're talking about this problem you have with another person, it's you, like, I'm the asshole. So throughout the book, if I'm writing about something that happened that I was frustrated with, it's always from the point of view of like, what a dum-dum I was that I couldn't see this more clearly, instead of, can you believe this guy? And I think that helps, even when it's people that I know that I'm writing about feel okay about it.
I thought you were going to say, that helps even when I know that other person is the asshole.
Well, maybe.
I think the beauty about writing fiction is that I can pretend that it has nothing to do with anybody I know. Some years ago, my mother read a short story I'd written, and I have two sisters, and so I wrote the short story with two people, and her question was, well, what happened to the third child? This had nothing to do with my life, but there are people who are looking for the connection to your life. So I think if you're going to write, whether it's friends or family, and you're pulling from, and if you're writing fiction and you're pulling from your life, just make sure that those people cannot recognize themselves.
Are there topics that you have always wanted to explore in fiction or memoir that you just haven't gotten to yet?
Well, I tend to write books where people die, and I just want to write a book where everybody's alive at the end. That's my one goal.
I totally second that.
I realize I don't write very much about like just romance or just like that kind of like I'll have these periods, but then I kind of do the same thing, Donna, where I'm like, oh, it seems so happy, someone better die, something terrible must happen, because it just feels like me. So it'd be interesting to me to just write like, what about the story of something romantic that doesn't end in horror and tragedy?
I wrote a novel that did not quite work about a character, and I set out to make her sort of a Scarlett O'Hara, but modern day. And I really wanted to play with, like, how much could you make somebody not likable, just like in Gone with the Wind, right? There's this turning point, like, what a spoiled little thing she is, and then at some point you start rooting for her to succeed. And I thought, could I make that work? And I didn't make that work, but I would like to return to that challenge and make it work.
Are there models that you, like books you've read or things that you look at and you're like, this is exactly the type of thing that I'm going for in my work?
I always go back to, I go to like 3 different people. I go to earlier Laurie Moore, Laurie Coleman, and Alice Munro. And I love Laurie Coleman because there is nothing that she cannot describe with complete precision, and that her tone feels very light and very funny, but then you realize she's very smart, and she's not soft, you know, and so I love that about her. And I love Alice Munro because she can fit whole novels in a short story, and she will describe these things. Like her language, again, I guess it's all precision, but her language is never showy, but you just read it and you're just like knocked out at how perfectly she described all the stuff roiling beneath the surface of what looks like a boring life. And then Laurie Moore, because she's hilarious.
So years and years ago, and we will not start counting, when I was in college, I read Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. And it was a professor who had been doing an independent study, and she gave me that book to read. And so one of the things that was really fascinating for me with that book was the way she described the community, and how much, even though I was Jamaican, or am Jamaican, and she was writing about a community in Florida, it just felt so, something that I knew. It felt like my own experience. And so that's what I think I am doing, or what I certainly want to do in my fiction, is to write a community that feels like something you know. And these people feel very real to you. That's my goal. And I hope that when you read my book, that's what you feel. Like you can sit down and talk to these people, and they're real, and everybody accepts the fact that these fictional people are just completely real to you.
I don't know that there's any work I necessarily try to emulate, but I definitely get inspired by the greats. 2 of my favorite writers are Jesmyn Ward and Lauren Groff, and I can just read their books over and over again and feel like inspired by what language can do. My background is in poetry, and I often read poetry before writing fiction. It's a good reminder that every single word counts, even when you're writing a book.
Oh, I started this whole thing off.
No, I was looking at Amy. It's all good. Do you all have advice? There are all these wonderful women in the audience, and this is our final panel. Do you all have advice for all of them for writing, for reading, anything that you're like, you know what, this is what you need to walk out here thinking about?
I think everybody has